put a tie on. And she said, and don't wear your sneakers. Well, I put 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Today I'm talking about the end of life preparedness and the medical issues. But before we start, I have 2 addendums from last week. One of the addendums is the fact that when you have hospice care, it is paid for by Medicare and medical assistance and other insurances. So your out-of-pocket expenses is minimal, if any. And the other addendum is, in the coroner's talk, he said if there's a death in your home and you have to report it, you can call 911. But you have 2 other options. If you are working with the funeral home, or if you have hospice on board, you can call the funeral home or you can call hospice and they'll take care of everything else. So you have 3 options to call. And last week I made a big blunder. I was supposed to introduce our Stephen ministers. Our Stephen ministers do a great job in this church. And several of them are here today. They have their badges on, so they'll be available for a meet and greet after the presentation and also after church service. So if there's any Stephen ministers here right now, could you please stand so we know who you are? So they'll be available for meet and greet after the presentation and also after church. Now, I have to organize the slides a little bit. Let me turn on my computer. Crystal is my clicker today because the clicker doesn't work, so she has to advance the slides for me. I should have done this before. Basically, today what I'm going to talk about are your advance directives. And I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to explain, number 1, what they are, what the purpose is of the advance directives, give you some generic information about how you fill it out and what they're used for. I also want you to walk away with the idea of when they kick in. When do they become actually effective? And after I go over the advanced healthcare directives in Pennsylvania, I'm going to talk about POLST. POLST may be something different that you don't hear about very often, but they're portable orders of life-sustaining treatment. And we'll explain that, near the end of the talk. Now, advanced healthcare directives is a legal document. It was established in 1985, and it was established with the idea that because of the advances in healthcare delivery, we had methods now to keep people alive for a long time by mechanical means. So the state legislature put together this law. It passed in 1985, and it's been changed numerous times since then. Now, every state has their own laws and has their own advance directives. The nice thing is that they're very portable. So Pennsylvania's are accepted in other states, and other states are accepted in Pennsylvania's. So if you go to Florida and live in Florida for a couple months during the year, you don't have to have a second one done in Florida to be valid. Your Pennsylvania's one is definitely valid. And also, some states require that it has to be notarized. Pennsylvania does not require you to have it notarized. Now, what it is, it names a healthcare agent to decide treatment for you, and it gives healthcare treatment instructions to your healthcare agent or your healthcare providers. So it's a document. Now, before you sit down and fill out this document and complete it, you've got some homework that you have to do, and you have to think about it prior. As Dr. Kimball talked about last time, he said, you have to know what's important to you. You have to know what your wishes are. And you have to have the conversation with your family and your healthcare provider to express these or talk about these wishes. And you've got to be honest with yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. You can certainly say, I want everything done at the end of my life, or I don't want to do anything at the end of my life. So honest with yourself, know what your wishes are, do your homework, and prepare before you sit down and fill out the document. Now, let me give you the actual long definition of your advance directive. And I'm going to read this to you. In fact, I'm going to get a little closer so I can see the TV in the back. This is very detailed, it's very complicated, but I want you to know the official definition and description of it. So if you bear with me, we'll write it together. Its Advanced Healthcare Directives is a written set of instructions. It expresses your wishes for medical treatment. It may contain the healthcare power of attorney, where you name a person as your healthcare agent to decide treatment for you. And the second part is a living will, where you tell your healthcare agent and healthcare provider your choices regarding the initiation, continuation, withholding, or withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment and other specific directions. Okay? That is a big definition, all right? So we're going to break it down and go through it a little bit one by one. Its main purpose, we told what it is, we explained the definition, but what actually does it do? Well, it actually communicates your healthcare wishes. I only want you to go home with about 2 or 3 things from today. I want you to know that this advance directives communicates your healthcare wishes. And then the other thing I want you to know is when it kicks in. Now, it's a legally binding document, but who can fill it out? Well, the person who can fill it out, they have to be of sound mind, and they must be over 18 years old. Now, if you're under 18 years old, as long as you're a high school graduate, you're married, or you're an emancipated minor, then you can complete and fill out the document. Now, it is legally binding. Once you sign it in the presence of 2 witnesses, it becomes legally binding. And the witnesses must also be over 18 years old. Now, you sit down, you did your homework, you had the conversation, you know what you want, you completed it, you signed it, you had it witnessed. Now, what the heck do you do with it? This is the big question. Well, what you do, once you complete it, you make some copies, and you distribute it to various people. You definitely want to give it to the person that you choose as your power of attorney. You definitely want to give copies to your family. You want to give it to trusted friends. Definitely give it to your health care provider. You know, did I tell you I made the slides? That should say healthcare provider and not provided. I made that slide. That's my mistake. You know, so you give it to your healthcare provider and you give it to your faith leaders. Now, your reason you give it to so many different people is because you want to have it available in the event that you have an emergency, so somebody can pull it out and say, here's the advance directives. I have them right here. You want to keep the original and make sure that you give your provider your form or your documents so they can put it in your medical records. Now, the medical record can either be in a paper medical record, which isn't done as often today as it did when I was practicing, and you have electronic medical records. And the electronic medical records, they basically scan it, they put it in your form, and the nice thing about that, it's very portable, and it's accessible to all sorts of people very, very easily, you know, if it's in electronic medical records. Now, what happens if I fill this out 5 years ago and I decide, I changed my mind? Can you change your mind? Absolutely. How do you do it? How do you change your mind? Well, what you do, you have to collect all the advance directives that you've given out and then either destroy them, just rip them up and destroy them and replace it with a new one that you sign and have witnessed. Or you can get the old ones and just write void on it and then replace it with the most current ones. But very, very important to inform your healthcare provider that you are giving them a new, changed advanced directives so they can put this in as your current one and void the old one. So you can change it. Now this is really important. We talked about what your advanced care directives are. There are two parts of it, your power of attorney and your living will. We explained how you fill it out. We explained what to do with it after. But here's what I really want you to know, is that when does it take effect? Well, it takes effect, first part, you give your healthcare power of attorney the authority to speak for you either immediately. So once you fill out the form and the form is signed, you're giving that person the authority to go to doctor's offices, visits with you, to the hospital, and they can speak on your behalf. Or you give that power of attorney the authority to speak for you only, and I said only when you're unable to speak for yourself. Okay, so that's the power of attorney. The living will, when does this kick in? Well, there's two parts to it that have to be met before it kicks in. It cannot be followed unless your physician. Now, normally it takes more than one physician. They sit down and they agree on your condition, and they decide that you lack the ability to understand, you lack the ability to communicate, and you cannot make healthcare decisions for yourself. Okay, that's number one. And number two, they have to decide that you are either permanently unconscious or you have a terminal end-stage medical condition, which will result in death despite the introduction or continuation of any medical treatment. So, you have to have those two issues, and if you meet both the issues where you cannot communicate for yourself and you have a terminal end-of-life situation, then your living will kick in. Does everybody understand that? You're going to say, well, what if I don't have those two conditions and I can communicate? Well, if you can communicate, you continue to express your wishes to your healthcare provider what you want done. So, for example, if you have a terminal lung cancer and you fail the course of chemotherapy, and the physician said, well, you failed, I recommend that we go through another course of chemo and maybe add radiation to you. And you're able to understand, you can talk, you say, let me decide what I want to do. You have the right to say, yeah, let's proceed with both of those treatments, or you can say, I don't want to do anything. I'm going to decline those. Doc, can you just keep me comfortable? And either one of those is fine. So you certainly will communicate your own wishes and own desires until you no longer can communicate and it's determined that you have an end-stage condition, that medical treatment's not going to make any difference. That's when your living will kicks in. Any questions on that? Now, what if I don't have a power of attorney? Here's the really big reason why you should have one. If you don't have an advanced directive, your healthcare provider will ask your family and an adult who really knows your preferences and values to help determine your wishes for the treatment. Now, here's where Dan's talk was so important. You have to have that conversation. So if your family doesn't know your wishes and you don't have any friends that know your wishes, they have to make these decisions blindly. They have to kind of decide, oh, what would Dad want? Oh, I have to make this decision right now. And you're going to be very emotional and very distraught in the emergency, and say, we don't know what to do. We don't want to make a wrong decision. What did Dad want to do? So you can see how difficult this decision can be if you didn't have the prior conversation and if you didn't fill out the advanced directive document. And I'll tell you another case, what happened very, very commonly. As a physician, I would have to go talk to the family and say, I'm really sorry, but your father had a massive stroke. His chance of survival are practically zero. And I need to know how aggressive you want me to be in the event his heart should stop or he should stop breathing. Do you want me to do CPR? Do you want me to shock his heart and give him medicine to stimulate the heart? Do you want me to intubate him and put him on a ventilator? I need to know how aggressive you want me to be. And here's what typically would happen. The spouse would be so emotionally upset, she said, I can't make that decision. I don't want to make that decision. I don't want to do it. And the kids would say, two of them would say, Dad won't want anything, he'd just want to be comfortable. And then you have one of the kids would say, oh no, we're going to fight. We're going to do everything and do everything you can to save my dad. Now, what do? I'm really stuck because nobody's on the same page. So I would then have to discuss with the family and say, look, you have to have a family meeting. You have to come to some common conclusion here. You need to have one spokesperson, and I will check with you shortly to find out how aggressive you need me to be. That's the problem if you don't have an advance directive. You don't want to have your family or your spouse or anyone else make these decisions for you when they're not prepared, and especially during a very critical period of time. Let's look at two of these things individually. Your durable healthcare power of attorney. This is, I already said, you name somebody to make medical decisions for you, either immediately or when you no longer can speak for yourself. Now, who should you pick? You can pick almost anybody. A lot of times you pick your spouse, but sometimes your spouse isn't your best person because they're going to be very emotional and it's going to be difficult for them to make that decision. Usually pick a family member, and you got to think, which family member do I have who is the most, even-minded, they're less emotional and they can understand and speak for me. It can be a trusted friend who you have discussed your end-of-life wishes, your religious beliefs, and other values, and they agree and they understand them. So it can be a family member, a spouse, it can be a friend. Who may it not be? Well, you can't ask me as your physician to be your power of attorney. Cannot be your physician, and it cannot be any other healthcare provider who's giving you direct care, unless you're married to that person or if that person's family. And it may not be the owner, the operator, or the employee of a healthcare facility where you are getting care. Again, unless you are related or married to that person. So there's who you may pick and who you may not pick. Now, what decisions does the power of attorney make? Well, they pretty much make any decisions, and very important decisions. They first of all discuss with the medical staff, and they can either authorize, withhold, or withdraw any type of medical care. They'll talk about nutrition, they'll talk about IVs. They can authorize either the admission or the discharge from either a hospital or a nursing home facility. They can either hire or fire medical or social service personnel. And they can request specific physician orders, such as a do not resuscitate, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. They can make decisions about organ donation. Now, when you pick your power of attorney, you should have your main one, and then it's recommended that you have two alternates. Alternate one and alternate two. And the reason you do that is because you don't want to have your primary power of attorney on vacation and not available when a crisis occurs. So then you have alternate one step in. If alternate one's not there, alternate two can step in. Now there's a caveat to this. If you pick your spouse, the law is written that if either of you file for divorce, it becomes null and void, unless you fill out a form stating that I want my ex to continue to be my power of attorney. Okay? So the durable power of attorney, we explained who it may be, what their duties are, and who may it not be. And that you should pick, two alternatives. Now let's quickly discuss the living will. Now the living will, as we already mentioned, is making healthcare decisions and wishes to be followed when you no longer can understand or communicate for your own medical decisions, and you are permanently unconscious, or you have a terminal end-of-life condition where medical treatment is not going to make any difference. That's when it kicks in. And you can make all sorts of individual decisions. You can decide in your living will, do I want CPR? Do I want somebody to do chest compressions and shock me? Do I want somebody to give me medicines to my heart to stimulate my heart? Do I want somebody to put a tube down in my windpipe and put me on a ventilator? Do I want kidney dialysis if my kidneys fail? Do I want continued, or do I want to have chemotherapy? Do I want antibiotics? Do I have an infection? Do I want antibiotics, or just say, leave me alone? Do I want tube feedings, where they either put it down through your nose or through your abdomen? And do you want hydration? Do you want IVs, or do you want medications? So these are all decisions you can make beforehand to tell your healthcare provider what you want and what you don't want. Now you can find a lot of these advanced directives. You're going to say, well, where do I get them? Well, your healthcare provider should have them. Your health institution or your healthcare system should have them. And you can get them online. And there's a lot of really good ones out there. This is one that I really like. It's called 5 Wishes. A little bit of history. It's done by the Aging with Dignity group out of Tallahassee, Florida. And it was a group that was started by Mother Teresa. What I like about it, it's very kind and it's very compassionate. I think it has only one flaw, though, and I'll explain what I don't like about it. So, what does it do? Let me show you this. Wish number 1 is your power of attorney, where you pick out your health agent. Number 2 is your living will. And I think this is where it's a little bit flawed, because I don't think it's specific enough. It's very general. It gives you 3 alternatives. It says close to death, in a coma and not expected to wake up or recover, or permanent and severe brain damage and not expected to recover. Under each one of those, you have 3 options. It says, I do not want to have life support systems. You check the box. The other one is, I do want to have life support. The other one says, I do not want life support treatments, and if it was started, I want it stopped. And the last one is, if I have a life support treatment, I'll agree if my doctor thinks it's going to help, but if it's not helping, then stop it. So there's a yes, I want it, no, I don't want it, and let's try it. I don't think it's specific enough. Because a lot of other advanced directives, they have check boxes where you say, I want CPR, and you check yes or no. I want a ventilator, yes or no. I want antibiotics, you check yes or no. I want tube feedings, you check yes or no. So you can improve this one, the 5 wishes, by filling out the bottom here with specifics. Okay, does that make sense? What I really like about the 5 wishes is they have wish number 3. How comfortable do I want to be? And it gives you options, and you can check them off that you don't want. Let me give you a couple examples. It says, my wish for how comfortable I want to be. I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medications to relieve my pain, even if it means I'll be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. I wish to have a cool, moist cloth put on my head if I want a fever. And I wish to know about options for hospice care to provide emotional, medical, and spiritual care for me and my loved ones. So there are just 3 options that you can pick. Wish number 4 is very compassionate and kind too. It says, my wish for how I want people to treat me. And I'll read just a couple of these options. I wish to have people with me when possible. I want someone to be with me when it seems that death may come at any time. I wish to have others by my side praying for me when possible. I wish to have members of my faith community told that I am sick and asked to pray for me. I wish to be cared for with kindness and cheerfulness and not sadness. So there's a couple options. There's more options you can pick. And then wish number 5 are a whole bunch of them that say, my wish for what I want my loved ones to know. And I'll read just a couple of these. I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. I wish to be forgiven for the times I have hurt my family, friends, and others. I wish for my family and friends to think about what I was like before I came seriously ill. I want them to remember me in this way after my death. And then there's a couple other options in here where you can put in your favorite hymns, your favorite poem, your favorite music, and so on. So I like this one with the option that you improve the living will. And I have 50 copies, so if you would like one of these at the end of this presentation, Linda will certainly hand them out. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears here, and I'm doing okay with time, surprisingly. Sometimes I can get a little long-winded and ramble, so I'm doing okay with time. I want you to understand what a POLST order is. P-O-L-S-T. It stands for Portable Orders of Life-Sustaining Treatment. Now, these are different than the advanced directives. These are orders that are written by your physician. So if you're hospitalized, me as an attending physician would discuss with the family, review the advanced directives, have a pretty good idea of what the patient would want, and decide this person nor the family wants any heroics done, and they will be a do not resuscitate. We are not going to do chest compressions. We're not going to shock the heart. We're not going to give medications. We're not going to intubate. We're not going to put them on a ventilator. We're going to keep them comfortable. But that requires an order written by me, the attending physician. And there's other orders that you can write. Certain orders, like if you're in a nursing home, the order can be, do not hospitalize. Mom's been in the hospital 3 times already for the same things. It never improves. It's always hard on her to be transported back and forth to the hospital. She's at end of life. Let's keep her comfortable. Let's keep her in the nursing home. An order can be written, do not hospitalize. Or you can say, do not hospitalize unless you talk to family first. You can have orders, do not start antibiotics. Do not resume chemotherapy. So these are official physician orders that are carried out by the medical personnel. Now here's why it's important. Because if anybody here is an EMT or a paramedic, if they're called to your house, and if you don't have a POLST order, they are required to provide life-sustaining treatment. I'll give you an example. You have a person, your dad's at home, he decided to die at home, he has advanced directives, he doesn't want any heroics, and you're keeping him comfortable. And all of a sudden he starts getting more and more short of breath. And you get a little anxious and a little scared, and you say, oh my word, I have to keep him comfortable. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You call 911. 911 comes flying in with the ambulance and the paramedics, and they visit the patient. They'll put oxygen on him, and if he stops breathing right then and there, they're going to resuscitate him. Or if his heart should stop either there or en route to the hospital, they're going to do CPRs and they're going to resuscitate him. And you say, but he didn't want that. Well, the EMTs have to carry out life-sustaining treatment. That's what they have to do. unless you have a pulsed order. If you have a pulsed order that is signed by your physician, you keep it at the home, you keep it with the patient, and if you would call the paramedics, you say, we have a pulse, do not resuscitate, do not do any heroics. And then they can say, okay, we have orders not to do that. Does that make sense? Pennsylvania have to have a pulse, and it's probably a good idea just to be safe and have a physician order at the bedside. So have a pulse. So I have here, the provider should have the pulse order because he filled it out. Number one, he ordered it. Number two, you keep a copy at home, at the bedside, and make sure that the nursing home has the orders and make sure that they know what your wishes are and what your wishes are not. So in conclusion, we're going to come back to you in just a minute. Okay, Chuck? Your pulse orders. If you have a terminal condition, I would carry one with you. I would keep one at your side. You have the bracelets, and today you have electronic medical records that somebody, if you're in a different state, they can tap into your MyChart. So I see your point. I see your point. I don't know how to answer that 100%, but you got to try to take as many precautions as you can, to protect yourself or protect your loved ones. It's not going to be 100%.
Heart attack happens, for example, and the paramedics come. They're obligated to provide services that are unless they have something documented that says not. Correct?
Yeah, but remember, you have to be permanently unconscious, or you have to have an end-of-life terminal condition before these kick in. So if you're healthy and you're up walking around and you're visiting in Florida, and you're at Disney World, and you have an MI and you fall and collapse, you're going to get, complete care because you are possibly going to make it. You're not at the point yet where you are not going to be at end of life. So if I have a heart attack right here that I'm scared giving this talk, I want somebody to resuscitate me. Even if I have an advanced directive and said, no, I don't want to be resuscitated. But in an acute situation, when I know that the physician says, oh no, you're not terminal, you have an 80% chance of full recovery, well then this doesn't kick in. Does that make sense? So in an emergency situation, Dan, you agree with that? So in conclusion, have the conversation with your family, friends, and your clergy, and definitely physician. Complete the document, sign it, have it witnessed, and distribute it, because you want to make your wishes known when you're at an end-of-life situation. Understand that this is the point I want to make. Understand when your power of attorney and your living will becomes effective. You have to be permanently unconscious. You have to have a situation where any health intervention is not going to make any difference, and you're unable to communicate for yourself. That's when these kick in. If you change your mind, you can certainly do another advanced directive. And make sure that if you are a terminal and you want to die at home and you don't want a lot of heroics done, make sure your doctor fills out a pulse and keep the pulse next to you. So you can see why this is so important to have this all documented and have the discussion so your families do not have to make this decision, when a crisis occurs. Because being prepared for your end of life is probably the most wonderful gift that you can give to your family. So I have time for a couple of easy questions. And I said easy. I don't want any hard questions. I already answered a hard question. Yours is going to be too hard.
So, medical care power of attorney.
Yes,
Do I have some special card I carry around so
there is.
I want this person out of the hospital so I can leave?
You can. You know, so there is actually a card on here in the 5 wishes, and some of them they can actually print it out. So yes, there is a card that you can carry around. Here it is here. My 5 wishes wallet card and my primary physician and my advanced directives.
I assume then that 5 wishes does not cover a pulse.
5 wishes is not a pulse. 5 wishes is advanced directives. They're two different. They're completely different. This is explaining your wishes, but the pulse is a physician orders what are going to be carried out. Well, I thank you for your attendance. I didn't see anybody fall asleep, so I'm really happy here. Now, next week we're going to have Darryl Worley come in, and he's going to talk about the legal aspects, what you do and before death, and some of the things that you have to take care of after death. So, I did pretty good with time, and I appreciate your attention, and thank you again for coming.